There's some breaking news from the January 6th Select Committee to tell you about, news that broke just a few moments ago. A brand new subpoena targeting a name you will surely be familiar with, Kimberly Guilfoyle. Remember her? She's a former Fox News host, a former Republican operative who worked for Donald Trump's re-election campaign. She also happens to be engaged to Donald Trump Jr. In a statement, Committee Chair Benny Thompson writes this, quote, Ms. Guilfoyle met with Donald Trump inside the White House, spoke at the rally that took place before the riot on January 6th, and apparently played a key role organizing and raising funds for that event. The Select Committee is seeking information from her about these and other matters. Because Ms. Guilfoyle backed out of her original commitment to provide a voluntary interview, we are issuing today's subpoena that will compel her to testify. We expect her to comply with the law and cooperate. Joining us now, MSNBC legal analyst Neil Katyal, former acting U.S. Solicitor General, now a Georgetown law professor. Here at the table, Jonathan Karl, ABC News chief Washington correspondent, author of the book Betrayal, the Final Act of the Trump Show. John Karl, first on the breaking news about Kimberly Guilfoyle. This is clearly part of the follow the money part of their investigation.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, as you just read, she was there on January 6th. She was in the Oval Office when Donald Trump had that conversation at 11 in the morning with Mike Pence and told him, as he admitted to me, you can either be a patriot or you can be a whatever.
Right.
But I think if you look at this letter from Benny Thompson, the key thing is her role in the grift, in raising money by lying about the election. It talks about how she was at that rally bragging to somebody, we raised so much money for this. Literally, one of my donors, Julie, at $3 million. So she's bragging about how much this was all a big cash cow.
And the potential criminality there is that what the committee has focused in on is that it was a lie. It was fraudulently raised money. Is that where she may face some jeopardy?
And keep in mind, the committee is not only looking for criminality here, but that is the potential. You could have potential wire fraud. You could have, they were clearly marketing in a fraudulent way. But the committee is also, I think, trying to build a broader case about what was happening here. We know Trump's obsessive attempt to keep power. But there was also this other thing, which frankly hasn't gotten as much attention, which is how much this entire operation was an effort to raise money with lies and raise money that had nothing to do with overturning the election. I mean, this was about raising money to raise money.
Yeah, I mean, Neil, I remember before Trump left office, obviously after he'd lost, but before he'd left, a very close former Trump advisor said to me, this is all about padding the legal defense fund, because he leaves, he's under investigation in New York City, in New York State. He wasn't yet under investigation, I think, in Georgia, but he already faced tons of legal fights, and he knew he'd lost. It was all about raising money. At some point, he seems to become convinced of his own delusions. But what do you make of this probe and its focus on the fraudulent funds?
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, Donald Trump only created jobs for one segment of the American economy, for lawyers, and now he's got to pay them. And so it's not surprising that you have this investigation into this, because they were just trying to clearly fundraise off of it. And it's really not surprising that Kim Guilfoyle has been subpoenaed at this point, because she said last week, oh, I'm going to voluntarily cooperate. But I don't think anyone who knows anything about the Trumps thinks that was likely. She just said that in order to delay things out. And now she said she won't cooperate when she's learned what those questions are, like tell the truth. And so the subpoena is done to try and enforce that. And so now she'll presumably try and claim privilege. I have no idea what privilege she's going to try and claim here. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if she gets a quick hitch marriage to Don Jr. so she can claim spousal privilege, for that. It turns out there is nothing in the law like fiancé, privilege for the fiancé of the person who's the czar triggering the libs or something. That's not a thing in the law. So I'm not sure what she's got. And, coming, Nicole, on the heels of the news yesterday, that chilling filing by the Congress saying there was just tons of mischievous planning and nonsense all engineered by Donald Trump and John Eastman to try and steal an election, and formally accusing the president of a good faith belief that they think he committed federal felonies, serious ones. I mean, it's all an astounding 24 hours out of this 1-6 committee.
Hey, Nicole, one thing really important about the grift is they were raising money for the legal effort, but they weren't actually paying the lawyers. Rudy Giuliani wasn't getting paid.
Still hasn't been.
The RNC was covering legal bills. So they were raising money for a legal effort, but not spending any money on the legal effort.
Pick up on what Neil's talking about, and I think he used the word chilling. And what's chilling about it, frankly, is that the first place we learn about stitching together the evidence to accuse the ex-president of a felony conspiracy to defraud the government is Congress, not DOJ.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of frustration there, and ultimately we'll see if this ends up being a referral and if the DOJ will actually act upon it. But I thought was really interesting here is the way that they framed the case. They point out that the president went through all of these efforts in the courts to challenge the election results. As you know, 60 cases, losing all of them. And then this line really struck out to me. He and his associates began to plan extrajudicial efforts to overturn the results of an election and prevent the president-elect from assuming office. This was an extrajudicial effort. He had every right to go through the process of challenging results through the courts. That was failing. So then they went and tried to do something that was extrajudicial, that was frankly illegal.
I think extrajudicial isn't in most of our vocabularies, Neil, and it reminded me of Mueller's sort of riddle. If I could say he hadn't committed a crime, I would. I mean, the opposite of that is he committed a crime. The extrajudicial means, as John Carl just said, illegal. Talk about the framework that was laid out that you described as chilling. I think that's the right word.
Yeah, so I think that this is basically a criminal referral to the Justice Department. It's not formally one, but it informally has the exact same, you and I are reading this, but so too is Merrick Garland and all the prosecutors at the Justice Department. And I understand Jonathan's frustration. We've waited years for Trump to finally be held accountable, but congressional committees, of course, are not going to idly throw out language like what we saw in yesterday's filing. And, that filing is signed by Doug Letter, who's like one of the most respected lawyers in D.C., bipartisan individual at the Justice Department for 40 years. And what this filing says is, look, we're willing to take this to a judge for, in-camera kind of ex parte review of these documents because we think a crime has been committed. And, it's going to be very hard for the Justice Department to ignore that. And yes, I think a criminal investigation is a different standard than the filing yesterday because you have to show criminal intent, a kind of state of mind. But now we have over 550 interviews with the Select Committee. We've got hundreds of documents and some very, very shady emails. So we don't just have at this point a solid basis for a DOJ investigation. We have a month's worth of trial exhibits. And the best they've got in defense on criminal intent is, well, Donald Trump thought that he won. Well, the documents that were revealed yesterday suggest otherwise, that he was told repeatedly not. And even if so, being an egomaniac is not a defense to a criminal prosecution. And that's why the filing yesterday is so important.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm tall. It doesn't make me tall. I want to read this piece of evidence because it clearly comes from something they learned through their probe. According to the president's senior campaign advisor, Jason Miller, soon after the election, a campaign data expert told the president in pretty blunt terms that he was going to lose. The president knew he'd lost. And if you just stitch together, extrajudicial, he'd lost in the courts because they were immune to his, fake news stuff that washes on OAN and Fox. Anywhere where his lies ran up against a state or a local court, it failed. But it almost prevailed inside the government he ran. Just talk about this filing, building on your reporting, and how close the committee has now sort of run down all the evidence of how close we came.
Well, I think what's really significant here is the line you just read, and not so much for what it said, but who said it. The footnote, it comes from Jason Miller's sworn deposition to the committee. So this is one of the president's top advisors on the campaign, so close to the president that he stayed with him after January 6th. He stayed with him after January 20th, went down to Mar-a-Lago with him, and he is telling the committee that, look, we told Donald Trump bluntly that he was going to lose. that there was no. Now, I describe that in my book. I describe a scene Saturday after the election where the top advisors come along and say, look, Pennsylvania's gone. You really don't have a chance here or there. It's really a really long shot, Mr. President. But it's one thing for me to write about it. This is one of his top people going before that committee that he's vilified and telling them under oath that he was told, not just by Jason Miller, but by his other advisors, that he was losing the election.
Well, and I want to ask both of you about this. I mean,
in other words, that the steal was a lie.
Well,
I mean, it's all a lie.
And that Jason Miller didn't lie to the committee. I mean, the news is sort of on three levels. One, that Jason Miller went in, and two, that Jason Miller went in and told the truth. And three, that this whole charade that they all keep up of attacking the 1-6 committee is just that. They've gone in and taken it very seriously.
They've taken it, they've cooperated, and they have, I mean, there have been the Steve Bannons, there have been the John Eastmans that have tried to fight, but a great number of people very close to the president, and we've only seen a bit of it in these filings, have gone to the committee and testified under oath and presumably testified truthfully.